Welcome to episode 511 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I am interviewing writer-director Julio Soto Gurpide. He just directed a big animated feature film called Inspector Sun. So we dig into that film and how all of that came about for him. I have a number of very specific questions about animation and the writing of animation and just how these films are put together from a writing perspective. This is not something I really know anything about. I've never been involved in an animation project. So if you're interested in learning more about writing for animation, this is definitely an episode you're going to want to check out. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. The social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast and then look for episode 511. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and career letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing director Julio Soto Gurpide. Here is the interview. Welcome, Julio, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me here.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Sure. I grew up in Spain, in Madrid, the capital. I used to be a visual artist. I was a painter. When I was 18, I moved to Scandinavia, where I spent 5 years. And then I got a scholarship to study in New York, where I studied at Pratt Institute, and there I got involved in cinema. I studied film. I started writing my own stories as well. I started with experimental video, documentaries, and then I got slowly into fiction. And then in New York, this was the late 90s, early 2000s, I was working in advertising for many years. Mostly involved in animation. And from that point on, I started getting into bigger productions, and Inspector Sun is my second feature as a director in animation. I've directed other features, but mostly live action.
Okay, perfect. So let's get into Inspector Sun and talk about that a little bit. Maybe to start out, you can give us a pitch or a log line. What is this story all about?
Sure. The story is set in the 1930s in Shanghai. That's where it starts. Inspector Sun is the most famous detective at that time in Shanghai. So he manages to capture his arch nemesis, the Red Locust, and he finally embarks in an extended holiday aboard a seaplane. And during this flight, he actually has to go back into detective investigation because there is a murder. So he has to figure out who's done it. It's very much a take on Agatha Christie's stories, with the particularity that everything takes place in a world of insects, where they've built this parallel world to the human world, where they have a ballroom, they have a big brass band, they have you have all the stereotypes of the film noir stories with mobsters, smugglers, femme fatales, assassins. It's a very cool story.
Yeah. So as a film noir is typically not kids' fare. Obviously, this is animated. So who is this movie for? Is it for children? Is it for adults?
This is a movie for families. I mean, when I say that, I mean like literally, because there is a lot of humor that is meant targeting the younger audiences, but there is also jokes and humor that the parents as well are going to get. So we are hoping to sort of like make it very interesting for both, like
Hmm.
grown-ups and kids as well.
Yeah, yeah, gotcha. So, how did you get involved with this screenplay as a director? Just what was the stage that it was at when it came to you? And just, I'm just always curious, just logistically, how does a guy like you get scripts into his view that potentially you might want to direct?
Sure. The story started at the American film market in 2017, I believe it was. That's a great place, by the way, to sell stories and to find producers for your stories. Everybody goes there.
Hmm.
So I met Rocco Puccillo, who was the writer of this particular story. I knew the story already because it had won the Samuel Goldwyn Award, which is a very interesting award for writers, and it was the first time that they awarded this particular prize to an animated story. So it was a big deal. How did I get in touch with that? I guess the producers, there are a couple of producers based in the UK, and they've done quite a lot of big productions, and they knew the writer, so they sent me the script. I read it, I loved it right away. From page 5 already I knew that this was
Hmm.
something very unique and original, and it wasn't so much that it was difficult to get to option the script or anything like that. It was just a matter of like producing such a complex story because it's very ambitious.
Hmm.
The script is very difficult. And like you said, it's a topic that is not normally very common among family films, the noir stories,
Hmm.
mysteries, the murder stories. So we had to give it a twist to make it more palatable for everybody. And that was the biggest challenge of the story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now you just said it was difficult and complex. One of the things, again, I don't have any experience with animation, but one of the things that seems, at least from the outside, is that you can do a period piece, you can do these elaborate, crazy characters and this sort of stuff with animation, and it's not really any harder. Obviously, live action, it would be a totally different ballgame. So, what is hard about something like this when you have a script like this that's going to be animated? Just the number of people involved, the number of animators, the number of voices. What is actually difficult about this?
Sure. I mean, any animated film is difficult. In this particular film, more than 265 people participated in this film. So it's a big crew.
Mm-hmm.
But what makes a script more difficult or less difficult in animation is mainly the number of sets that you have, the number of characters. Like you always try to contain everything to a minimum of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why, for example, in this movie, the first act takes place in Shanghai. The second act, which is the biggest bulk of the movie, takes place in the seaplane. It's an interesting story about the seaplane. They used to call it the Flying Hotel. They were using these planes until the 1950s. It was like a luxury traveling,
Huh.
transoceanic flights. They had luxury cabins, restaurants. I mean, it was a big deal. So we really like this set. And then the third part takes place in San Francisco, and we contain that to a number of streets and a few
Hmm.
small locations. So I would say like sets and characters. That's what makes it
Huh.
more expensive or less.
Yeah, yeah. And that's interesting because that's in a lot of ways that's the same that for a live action movie. Those are some of the same constraints. So let's just run through this. I'm just curious again. I don't have a lot of experience in animation, so I'm just curious, just from a logistical standpoint. Take us from sort of script to screen. Like, okay, so you have a script that you guys all liked. I'm sure there was some development on that. What is the next step? Do you then storyboard it out? And how involved are those storyboards? How many storyboards? Is it every angle, like every single shot you do one storyboard? Is it one storyboard per scene? Just talk us through that early stages. Like, what is the next step from going from script to screen?
Sure. There is one major difference between animation and live action. In live action, you can have several cameras, shoot several takes, and you in the end you pick the one that you like or do an edit.
Mm-hmm.
In animation, you don't have that luxury to do that. You have to go straight to the one shot that you planned in animation. I mean, in Animatic, which is basically the moving storyboard. So the first thing you do is you storyboard everything from beginning to end, and with certain poses. So it's not just a static storyboard, but it's kind of like an animated storyboard. And that tells you already, sorry, the number of shots that you have, the length of each shot, the angles, the characters that you have there. So then you do a breakdown of everything that you have in your scene. And with that breakdown, you do a layout, which is basically the same thing, but in 3D. You have the cameras already. It's very much like in live action. You do a rough set, rough characters, and then you position the cameras. You do a basic layout.
And you're doing
Which
this
is
on a
very
computer. You're doing this on a computer in some software. You're like laying these things out.
yes,
And what is
exactly.
the actual software that you use for something like this?
We usually use Maya. Maya, it's a 3D program. It's been the standard for many years in animation. So what I'm saying is not uncommon to big production, like big budget productions, such as, I don't know, Avatar or any of the big budget movies. They do exactly the same thing. They do you know, they do basically a 3D layout of every scene, every character, and everything before they actually shoot any live action person, because it's very, it's very, in a way, it's very cost effective, and you see what the final movie is going to look like. And that gives you an idea whether it's working or not.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we do is we record reference voices, like is basically with, you start with 3 or 4 actors, usually 2 guys and 2 girls, and then you do the voices, the basic voices with some acting, and that gives you the timing of the scenes and the flow of the dialogue and everything. And then you go back to the script, you rewrite the dialogues if they need to be, funnier or more fluent. And then you go back to the storyboard, you recut, and with your final animatic, that's pretty much what you're gonna animate. And the final movie, it's 90% what you did on the animatic.
And what is animatic? When you say that word, what does that actually mean?
It's an animated storyboard. Like I said, it's a, rather than a static storyboard, you do some poses, like basic keyframe
Gotcha.
poses.
Gotcha.
Uh,
Gotcha.
I,
So
I, I could send you a sample if you want. I mean,
yeah,
it's
maybe that would be interesting. Yeah, if I could link to something like that, I think that would be interesting for the listeners. Now, with something like Maya, what do you need? Like, if I wanted to do this for my next short film, just like a 5-minute short film, what would I actually need to bring someone in and to do this with Maya? I need someone that's experienced. Could one person like do everything that needs to be done for the to do this sort of animatic storyboard for my live action short film?
If it's a short film, yes, I would say yes. But you need to find somebody that is knowledgeable about narrative, like visual narrative,
Mm-hmm.
and who knows how to position a camera and do basically the storytelling in 3D.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically the blocking and the camera. It's blocking pretty much like in a live action set. You put the characters in the room, you place the cameras, and then you move the cameras around to see which shot, which angle is the best for your story. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Gotcha. Now you had mentioned going back and doing some rewrites even after as you were sort of creating this animatic. Maybe you can give us some example, like how much of the story at that point gets rewritten? Is it just some dialogue, some tweaking of scenes, or do you have like, can you get pretty far through this process and then have to do some major story rewriting, some like real rewriting on the actual story and stuff?
I mean, in big productions like Disney or DreamWorks or similar, they get to do a lot of that. Like, for example, a movie like Zootopia. I mean, they rewrote like 80% of the movie. We don't have that kind of luxury. We're an independent production company, so I would say that maybe 15%, which is still a big chunk of it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know? I mean, what do you change? I would say like something like the humor. Sometimes when you read a script, you find it funny, you find it hilarious, but once you see it acted, maybe it's not that funny. Humor is a very tricky thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult. Like you could think it's very funny on the written page, but then once you see it played, it may not work. So you have to rewrite that and make it more
Hmm.
funny, or completely change the joke and do something else. Or maybe the action scenes are not that interesting anymore. The way you envision them is not that
Hmm.
funny or interesting. So those are the things that usually
Yeah. As a
change.
writer, as a screenwriter, are there some differences, just quickly to our audience, between writing for live action versus writing for animation? What do you see as some of the differences there?
Well, I think animation gives you the possibility to invent new universes, like anything
Mhm.
you can think of, basically, like a world set in the 1930s with the spiders as the sort of like the cops of the insect
Mhm.
world, and those, I would say, those idiosyncrasies of an insect world is something that obviously is not the same as if you write just a crime story for humans. I mean, it's
Mhm.
very different. uh, Obviously you also have to pay a lot of attention to humor, which is basic in animation. You want the story to be very always energetic, always, you can't have any downs, because people are, kids, you're going to lose
Mhm.
the audience. I mean, they're going
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
away, they're going to get bored.
Mhm.
I mean, I've never written live action family films, so I have no idea. I guess it's the
Mhm.
same. It is the
Gotcha.
same, but you have to keep the kids entertained, and that's
Mhm.
very difficult.
Yeah, that's sound advice. I have two young kids, and I can definitely attest to that. How can people see Inspector Sun? What's the release schedule going to be like for it?
It's gonna be out on October 27th. Uh, you're basically gonna have it in all major cities. I think 1,500 screens, if
Okay,
I'm not
perfect.
wrong. AMC theaters, the
Nice.
whole thing. So yeah, I mean,
Okay.
go and see it, because it's, the bigger is better in this case.
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep. Perfect. Perfect. And what's the best way for people to keep up with, what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up for the show notes so people can follow along with your career.
we're not big on social networks. Maybe we should, but we have a
Yes.
website, and
Okay. What's the
there's an
website?
email there. We yeah we oh the website is the think as in think lab as in laboratory. So
Thinklab.com.
the thinklab.com. Yeah,
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. We'll
and
link out to that.
we basically respond to every email. So yeah.
Okay. Julio, perfect. I really appreciate coming on the show today. Good luck with this film and good luck with all your future films as well.
All right. Thanks so
So,
much.
hey,
Okay.
thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye. A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I have on screenwriter Dennis Paoli. He's written some classic horror films like Reanimator from the 80s, and he just did a new film called Suitable Flesh starring Heather Graham. This is a story that's based on an H.G. Lovecraft short story, which he's done quite a bit of in his career, including Reanimator. So we dig into this adaptation, how he did the adaptation of this classic story, and sort of how he approached this screenplay. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's the show. Thank you for listening.